Mhm. Greetings. May peace and power elevation be to you guys. This your girl Tiffany coming through live in effect. And today's topic we're gonna be dealing with the history about Stephen Biko. Stephen Biko was a South African activist. He was a revolutionary, and he also helped formulate the Black consciousness movement, which was fighting against apartheid. So what I want to do is before I get started, make sure that if you are on YouTube, you can go ahead and share this YouTube video and subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell whenever I come on. If you are on Facebook, go ahead and share this video and subscribe to the channel and things of that nature. So yeah, please make sure you do that. All right. So anyways, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and get started, and you guys can come back and watch it later for those who miss out on this video. All right, so let's look at who Stephen Biko is or was. So this is Stephen Biko, okay? This is him. Very nice looking young man. Now, let's go into his story, his biography. All right? Ooh. Okay. So, here is the biography of Steve Biko. All right, he was born on December 18th, 1946. He died on September the 12th of 1977. Okay. So Steve Biko was an anti-apartheid activist who spearheaded the Black consciousness movement in South Africa. Okay. So for those of you who don't know what apartheid is like segregation here in the United States. So basically there was segregation between the Black South Africans and the white South Africans. So that's basically what the apartheid was. Okay. Now, it says that he was born in King Williamstown, South Africa. All right. So Steve Biko was an anti-apartheid activist and the co-founder of the South African Students Organization, subsequently spearheading the nation's Black consciousness movement. He also co-founded the Black People's Convention in 1972. Biko was arrested many times for his anti-apartheid work, and on September 12, 1977, died from injuries that he sustained while in police custody. Now let's look at his early years. Bantu Stephen Biko was born on December 18, 1946 in Kings Williamstown, South Africa, in what is now Eastern Cape Province. Politically active at a young age, Biko was expelled from high school for his activism and subsequently enrolled at St. Francis College in the Marion Hill area of KwaZulu Natal after graduating from St. Francis in 1966. Biko began attending the University of Natal Medical School, where he became active with the National Union of South African Students, a multiracial organization advocating for the improvement of Black citizen rights. So, so activism always been a prominent thing with Steve Biko. But because of the apartheid movement that was taking place in South Africa, it has influenced him in more ways than others to get involved and to fight off against the oppression of the apartheid. All right. So let's go ahead. Um, Co-founding SASO and the Black People's Convention. All right. So in 1968, Biko co-founded the South African Students Organization, an all-Black student organization focusing on the resisting of apartheid, and subsequently spearheaded the newly started Black consciousness movement in South Africa. Biko became SASO's president in 1969. 3 years later, in 1972, he was expelled from the University of Natal due to his political activism. That same year, Biko co-founded another Black activist group, the Black People's Convention, and became the group's leader. This group would become the central organization for the BCM, which continued to gain traction throughout the nation during the 1970s. Now, here's a quote over here from Biko. It says, Black consciousness is an attitude of the mind and a way of life. The most positive call to emanate from the Black world for a long time. Its essence is the realization by the Black man of the need to rally together with his brother around the cause of their oppression, the blackness of their skin, and to operate as a group to rid themselves of the shackles that bind them to perpetual servitude. Now that's deep. Now this is him again. Okay. Now in 1973, Biko was banned by the apartheid regime. He was forbidden to write or speak publicly, to talk with media representatives, or to speak to more than one person at a time, among other restrictions. As a result, the association, movements, and public statements of SASA members were halted. Working undercover thereafter, Biko created the Zamale Trust Fund to aid political prisoners and their families in the mid 1970s. So pretty much, he was banned. He was kicked out of colleges, university because of his political activism. See, when you are a very radical person and you speak out against things that's regarding to an oppressed group, you become identified as a threat and you become identified as a problem. So therefore, you will have to be removed from the public eye, and by not being able to do any type of public engagement, public speaking, or either attend to universities because you're causing too much chaos. And that's what it was with Steve Biko. He was causing chaos with his activism and his movement. So therefore, he wasn't very complacent at all. Let's continue. Okay. It says arrest, death, and legacy. Now, during the late 1970s, Biko was arrested 4 times and detained for several months at a time. In August of 1977, he was arrested and held in Port Elizabeth, located at the southern tip of South Africa. The following month, on September 11, Biko was found naked and shackled several miles away in Pretoria, South Africa. He died the following day on September 12, 1977, from a brain hemorrhage, later determined to be a result of injuries he had sustained while in police custody. The news of Biko's death caused national outrage and protests, and he became regarded as an international anti-apartheid icon in South Africa. The police officers who the police officers who had held Biko were questioned thereafter, but none were charged with any official crimes. However, 2 decades after Biko's death in 1997, 5 former officers confessed to killing Biko. The officers reportedly filed application for amnesty. Amnesty was it amnesty to the Truth and Reconciliation Commission after investigation implicated them in Biko's death, but amnesty was denied in 1999. Mm. Wow. Personal life. In 1970, Biko married uh Natinsky Mashalaba. The couple later had 2 children together, sons in Kosinati in Kosinati and Samora. Biko also had 2 children with Mafila Ramphele, an active member of the Black Consciousness Movement. Daughter Lorato, who was born in 1974 and died of pneumonia at 2 months old, and son Halumelo, born in 1970. Additionally, Biko had a child with Lorraine Tabane in 1977, a daughter named Mutalasi. So, all right, that's the information on Steve Biko. Okay, so let's see what else we can find. Now, here's a little information right here. We're going to South Africa's Black Consciousness Movement in 1970s. It's called Thoughts. It's called thoughtcode.com. .com. All right, so that's where I'm at. I'm on thoughtcode.com. South Africa's Black Consciousness Movement in 1970s. Voice of anti-apartheid movement in South Africa. All right, so this was written on April the 1st of 2019. And it goes into what the Black Consciousness movement was about. The Black Consciousness movement was an influential student movement in the 1970s in apartheid South Africa. The consciousness movement promoted a new identity and politics of racial solidarity and became the voice and spirit of the anti-apartheid movement at a time when both the African National Congress and the Pan-Africanist Congress had been banned in the wake of the Sharpsville massacre. The BCM reached its zenith in the Soweto student uprising of 1976, but declined quickly afterwards. All right. Now, the rise of the Black Consciousness Movement. The Black Consciousness Movement began in 1969, where African students walked out of the National Union of South African Students, which was multiracial but white dominated, and founded the South African Students Organization. The SASO was explicitly non-white organization open to students classified as African, Indian, or color under apartheid laws. It was to unify non-white students and provide a voice for their grievance. But the SASO spearheaded a movement that reached far beyond students. 3 years later, in 1972, the leaders of this Black Consciousness movement formed the Black People's Convention to reach out to and galvanize adults and non-students. All right. And it says the aims and forerunners of the Black Consciousness movement. Loosely speaking, the Black Consciousness movement aimed to unify and uplift non-white population, but this meant excluding a previous ally, liberal anti-apartheid whites, as Steve Biko, the most prominent black consciousness leader, explained when militant nationalists said that white people did not belong in South Africa, they meant that we want to remove the white man from our table, strip the table of all trapping, put him on it by him. Put it on. I said put on it by him. Excuse me. Decorate it in true African style, settling down, and then ask him to join us on our own terms if he like. The element of black pride and celebration of black culture linked the black conscious movement back to the writings of W.E.B. Du Bois, as well as the idea of Pan-Africanism and La Negritude movement. It also arose at the same time as the black conscious power in the United States. These movements inspired each other. Black consciousness was both militant and avowedly nonviolent. The black consciousness movement was also inspired by the success of the Frelimo in Mozambique. And then also it goes down to say Soweto and the afterlives of the BCM. The exact connection between the Black Consciousness Movement and the Soweto student uprising are debated. But for the apartheid government, the connection were clear enough. In the aftermath of Soweto, the Black People's Convention and several other Black consciousness movement were banned in their leaderships, arresting many after being beaten and tortured, including Steve Biko, who died in police custody. The BPC was partially resurrected in the Azana People's Organization, which is still active in South African politics. Okay, so that's that information. So again, what inspired the Black consciousness movement to come about was because of the National Union, and many of the blacks walked out of it because they felt like they were being treated unfairly, of course, and the laws was geared towards bringing about separation and segregation, and that the whites in South Africa were benefiting more off of resources, and they were earning more privilege than any other group. So it was the same scenario like here in America, how whites benefited, how they were more privileged, and blacks didn't really get all the rights and stuff. That's the same issue they had in South Africa. So over here we was dealing with segregation. Over there they were dealing with apartheid. That's the thing. So that's that information. Let's see. What else can I look up? All right, so right here. Right here it's called the title. You find who? You find am who? You find am what's it? You find Hamu. You find Hamu, a journal of African studies, Black consciousness, and the quest for a true humanity, which was written by Steve Biko. Okay. Right, it's called The Black Consciousness and the Quest for a True Humanity by Steve Biko. So this is one of his early writings that he did during the time when he was in the movement. Let me try to pull this up. Okay. And it says here, it says, it is perhaps fitting to start by examining why it is necessary for us to think collectively about a problem we never created. In doing so, I do not wish to concern myself unnecessarily with the white people of South Africa, but to get the right answers, we must ask the right questions. we have to find out what went wrong, where and when, and we have to find out whether our position is a deliberate creation of God or an artificial fabrication of the truth by power hungry people whose motive is authority, security, wealth, and comfort. In other words, the black consciousness approach would be irrelevant in a colorless and non exploitative egalitarian society. It is relevant here because we believe that in was it anomalous situation is a deliberated creation of man. There is no doubt that the color question in South African politics was originally introduced for economic reasons. The leaders of the white community had to create some kind of barrier between blacks and whites so that the whites could enjoy privilege at the expense of blacks and still feel free to give a moral justification for the oblivious exploitation. Did I say oblivious? I mean, excuse me, obvious exploitation that pricked even the hardest of white conscience. However, tradition has it that whenever a group of people has tasted the lovely fruits of wealth, security, prestige, it begins to find it more comfortable to believe in the obvious lie and to accept it as a normal that it alone is entitled to privilege. In order to believe this seriously, it needs to convince itself of all the arguments that support the lie. It is not surprising, therefore, that in South Africa, after a generation of exploitation, white people on the whole have come to believe in the inferiority of the black man, so much so that while the race problem started as an offshoot of the economic greed exhibited by white people, it has now become a serious problem on its own. White people now despise black people not because they need to reinforce their attitude so justify their position of privilege, but simply because they actually believe that black is inferior and bad. This is the basis upon which whites are working in South Africa, and it is what makes South African society racist. And now that's the writings that came from Steve Biko himself. And what he's talking about is the same thing that we have dealt with and that we're still currently dealing with. So there's a lot of similarities that's going on between what was happening in South Africa and what was happening in America. We had the same issue, and what was the issue? The white man. That's the issue. So it's a lot of similarities taking place, except that it's in Africa. And South Africa wasn't the only one that was dealing with the issue of the white man. You had other places. You had places, especially in West Africa, that was dealing with the issue of the white man. That was dealing with the issue of racism, colonialism. And it's done by the same people that have taken our asses up out the continent and brought us over here to this place called America. The same people that was doing it in South Africa is the same people that was doing it to us in America. Or they came from that same exact region, Europe. But let me go ahead and show another article, but this is just one of them. Let me try to pull it back up. Yeah, this is one of the articles here. All right. So all right, this one is called the France Fanon, Steve Biko, Psychopolitics and Critical Psychology. which was written by Derek Hook. And I'm trying to find out what year. Okay, this was written in 2004. Okay. So now it looks like it's coming from a textbook. But anyways, now let's look at what is psychopolitics. All right, so psychopolitics is critical awareness of the role that political factors, relation of powers, play within dominant of the psychological and understanding of both how politics impacts upon the psychological and how personal psychology may be the level at which politics is internalized and individually entrenched. Okay, so it's a combination of psychology and politics mixed together. But you know what? Politics would come from psychology, basically, and psychology would come from philosophy because philosophy is the mother of all of this. All right. So let's see. Let's see what they're talking about regarding to Steve Biko. All right. So let me see something. All right. So this article here is more about friend Friends for None. But let's see what he's talking about in this article. Just trying to find something. Hmm. Okay, so let me just read this real quick. Let's just read the introduction. All right. So it says perhaps Franz Fanon's greatest source of originality as a critical theorist lies in his combination of psychology and politics. This overlaps of political and psychological forms of analysis is seen in the fact that Fanon approaches the problem of national liberation and social revolution from the vantage point of psychopathology and the problems of personal identity through a sustained focus on the violence of colonial encounter. To put this more precisely, all of Fanon's works falls into that category where the sciences of personality and the sciences of society converge in an attempt to traverse the distance between an analysis of the consciousness of the individual and the analysis of social institution. That Fanon moves between the socio-political and the psychological as well. I mean, each as a means of critiquing the other, meaning that his work has a lot to offer contemporary critical psychology, especially from within a South African context. This chapter focuses on what we might call the psychopolitics of Frantz Fanon as a way of exploring opportunity for critical psychology. The notion of psychopolitics, as it has been applied by Lebeau, amongst other, may be taken as referring to the explicit politicization of the psychological, such as the politicization can take at least three related forms. It may refer to the critical process by which we place a series of ostensibly, ostensibly psychological concerns and concepts within the register of the political, and thereby show of the extent to which human psychology is intimately linked to, in some ways, conditioned or limited by the social, political, and historical forces of its situation. Similarity, such as politicization, may refer to the critical process by which we employ psychological concept, or explanations, and even modes of experience to describe and illustrate the workings of powers. The hope in this respect is that by being able to analyze the political in such a psychological way, we may be able to think strategically about how we should intervene in the life of power. Extending this idea, thirdly, it might be argued that we can put certain forms of psychology to actual political work, that we can use both the concept and the understandings of psychology and the actual terms of psychological experience as a means of consolidating resistance to power. Hmm. So, to me, that sounds more like social philosophy. That's what it sounds like. It would sound like it would be in that realm of social philosophy. But anyways, that's a pretty intense article, right? It's called the Franz Fanon, Steve Biko, Psychopolitics and Critical Psychology. All right. So, mm. Okay, then. And then here's another source of information right here that expounds more on the Black consciousness and South African roots um, of Steve Biko. All right, so let's see. It goes on to expound on Black consciousness. Okay. All right, so it says Black consciousness. Steve Biko was the primary force behind developing Black consciousness as a coherent philosophy and organizing it as a movement dedicated to resisting apartheid, recognizing that the most potent weapon in the hands of the oppressors is the mind of the oppressed. Biko believed that psychological liberation would have to precede political liberation. Biko defined Black consciousness in an article for a student leadership seminar as the realization by the Black man of the need to rally together with his brothers around the cause of their operation, the blackness of their skin, and to operate as a group in order to rid themselves of the shackles that bind them to perpetual servitude. It seeks to infuse the Black community with a newfound pride in themselves, their efforts, their value system, their culture, their religion, and their outlook to life. All right. And it says Black consciousness rose out of this climate of fear and silence. Apathy gave way to misery and dissatisfaction among Black people, setting the stage for a liberation movement. Biko captures the situation in a newsletter written for the South African Students Organization. Ground for a revolution is always fertile in the presence of absolute destitution. The increasingly oppressive manifestation of apartheid created the Black consciousness movement that would function as apartheid's radical dialectical opposition. The tribal colleges, the segregated universities for Blacks, were the breeding ground for the movement. Post-colonial scholar Nigel Gibson describes how this rich segregation created a fertile environment for radical politics. Emerging out of the very colleges the government had set up to control Black students' minds, BC founders recognized the importance of the mind of the oppressed. The segregation of Black students at these universities created the conditions needed for a movement like Black consciousness to emerge. Political science David Hirschman, or is it Harsherman, explains in a very real sense the BC movement was therefore a stepchild of apartheid. The completeness of their isolation, resentment at an inferior education, frustration at lack of academic choices, the oppressiveness of their controlled circumstances, and time to ponder these matters was it times to ponder these matters together, all combined it with long-standing political anger to provide young black intellectual with a fertile environment for envisioning and initiating a new political movement. In this early stage of the movement, black consciousness not only opposed apartheid, but it was forced to crystallize its philosophical foundation in order to avoid its message being diluted by white liberals who also oppose apartheid. Hmm. All right. So that's the article that goes into more detail about Steve Biko and his life and his organization within the Black consciousness movements, and um how he was very active and very political and things of that nature. So, and this was written in 2014 at the University of Kentucky in Lexington. All right. So, and oh, excuse me, wrong one. It says Alexander Habibi, History, Keene State College, 158 Main Street, Keene, New Hampshire. All right. So I think this is just a publication right here. All right, it's on the top at the right hand corner. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, with our conclusion, I want to thank you guys for tuning in, watching, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. And please be safe out here. So that's enough information about the apartheid and the Black consciousness movement. So again, the same people that has colonized, that has oppressed those in other countries, especially in the African countries, are the same people that have done it here in the United States or in North America, in the Caribbeans, okay, even in South America. All right. So you dealing with the same people, which are the Europeans and those who are a descendant of the Europeans. Period. So, please take it easy and thank you for tuning in and watching. Until next time, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. And I'm out.